Massachusetts-born entrepreneur Robert Ansin has always been driven by two passions: to innovate and to give back. After attending three life-changing psilocybin retreats in Jamaica, he was inspired to create healing hearts, changing minds. Robert now wants to give others the opportunity to process their own traumas and unpack the roots of their mental health problems, and then go back to their communities to spread the healing. Robert is the proud father of two children, Indigo and Olly. Robert, welcome to the Jewish Psychedelic Podcast.
Thank you, my friend. It's an honor to be here with you.
And an honor to be in ongoing dialogue and communication with you for now several months. Robert, I want to hear part of your bio and part of your story. Central part is your experiences in Jamaica with psilocybin, your awakening in so many different ways. But I want to kind of go back a little bit
Yeah.
and hear more about little Robert, maybe Bobby. You as a child, what was your experience growing up as a young Jewish boy in the Northeast? Your family, what was important? What were you driven by?
Sure. So I was brought up in north central Massachusetts. My grandfather and my father were both shoemakers. And so um, I was brought up in a shoemaking family. Um, was working in a shoe factory from the time I was probably 9. And it it had a profound impact on me and played into my career in the real estate world because I just fell in love with these great big old industrial mills, and never dawned on me that these things could be obsolete. And but I had a front row seat. Uh, I was working in the factory in the 1970s, and my father was a leader for the American shoe manufacturing industry as the industry was what we now call maturing. Um, he worked with the Carter administration in the 70s to uh, sort of fight for a fair playing field to be able to compete with some of these foreign manufacturers. And and I saw him go to Washington. I went to Washington with Dad. I got to be in on the floor of the Congress, and and watch him just have these conversations to say, hey, um, if we want to be able to pay people a living wage, then you need to understand that with shoes, like half of the cost of a pair of shoes is the cost of labor, and and that had a profound impact. Watching him fight for workers who worked for us, who were like family to me, and then I had a front row seat watching as when Reagan came in, and Reagan didn't renew certain agreements, and almost overnight, like 90% of the American shoe manufacturing industry died. Uh, either they died or they went overseas, but um, same story, just different day in terms of industries that mature. And so that had a really profound impact on me. And but interestingly, led to my career in sort of adaptive reuse of old buildings that were built for one reason, and and thinking about what they, not just the building but the entire community, could be used for. But growing up in the 70s, um, you know, it was not a large Jewish community. It was a very small Jewish community, and we knew pretty much all of the Jews in the North Central Mass area. And it wasn't a big part of my life, Zach. In fact, I went to a private school through the ninth grade, and it was hard enough, sort of having to go to school until 4 o'clock, like when all the other kids get off the bus at 1:30 and 2. And 2 days a week, I had to go to Hebrew school after that 4 o'clock. So that wasn't the coolest thing. And explaining to my friends, who were largely Gentiles, why I had to go to this other school after school and why our house was the only house without Christmas decorations. Um, and uh, we were, I don't know what you call us, cultural Jews, I guess. My mom wasn't bat mitzvahed. My dad was, but he never really talked about it until later in life, interestingly. We celebrated the high holidays. And as the youngest in my family, I got to play that role in the Seder, for example, and asking these questions. Um, but I was always that kid who was curious and loved science, loved sort of the scientific method, but it never dawned on me that science had all of the answers. Like, how can that be? It just never my compass, what I always relied on from the youngest of years, never dawned on me that what science was saying could be entirely true. Meaning, 14 billion years ago, there's this huge explosion, and here we are, just bumping into one another. That didn't feel like my truth. Um, but I was born with what I now call resilience, despite my parents and my teachers and family telling me one thing. I just never bought into it. And I always protected this kernel of what I considered to be the ultimate truth. And that was that I was a spirit. I wasn't just this monkey, sort of roaming around with other monkeys. Um, and thank God I was patient too, because it wasn't until I went to Jamaica that I got the proof that little Bobby needed, of who I really am and who we all really are, and what we're all part of. Um, and yeah, it's so November 21st of this year will be my fifth anniversary of what I consider to be my rebirth. Um, Maybe an even more important moment for me than the birth of my children. Um, and I really love being a dad, so that's saying something.
Well, then let's maybe get into it. I have questions still about family life and um, you know entrepreneurs and manufacturers, some isolation, but also connection to Jewishness, Jewish community. How that matrix of experience potentially helped inform your work and your interests later. Um, but maybe getting to Jamaica, maybe getting to those experiences. So before Jamaica, how did you get there? What was the precipitating action or event that you felt like I have to make this change in my
Yeah.
life, and you went so far to have these profound experiences?
So the first sort of event in my life was, in 2006. I remember looking up at the sky, feeling like I was on top of the world. And I remember having this little sort of mental conversation with God, with the universe, and saying, wow, I must have been really something in a past life to be having this life now. I mean, I just felt like I was firing on all cylinders. Um, Everything except my marriage wasn't perfect, but I sort of compartmentalized that. And I had built a company. I was rebuilding huge old mill buildings, like millions of square feet, hundreds of millions of dollars under reconstruction. The press was telling me how great I was. Other people were telling me how special I was. And I felt like I finally was maybe starting to live up to this um, little Bobby's goal of being seen by my dad as worthy of this great man who I really consider to be just the sun, that we all revolved around. And, you know, one day when my dad came to visit me north of Boston in this community where we didn't grow up, I had this big project underway, and he was so happy to tell me for the first time, um, somebody had said hello and said, "Oh, you must be Bob Ansin's dad." And so that was special. I wasn't dad's son. He was my father. And well, it wasn't a year later that the Great Recession hit, and everything that had been so wonderful just turned. And as I describe it, in 2006, if I felt like the pretty boy at the dance, could do no wrong, a year later, it was like I was the opposite. I was the ugly boy at the dance. And it was like whiplash. Um, and it was just the beginning. I had a huge project underway. I was overextended. Um, and sort of everything that they teach you about why to be cautious, and people that went through the Great Depression was happening. And those were my formulative years, Zach. Between 2007 till 2011, it was bad. It got worse. It got worse. And through the grace of God, I survived. Uh, I took to every at the end of every day, I would just cross off that day. I made it another day somehow, um, and I almost went bankrupt. Literally, I was down um, to that point. But I remember thinking, look, if I'm going to go bankrupt, I'm never going to do anything inconsistent with my own values and my morals. Period. Because that to me would be the end. If I ever had to look at my children ever and say, Dad cut corners, Dad acted immorally, Dad did things that he shouldn't have done, that would have been the end of the end. So I made a commitment that I would never do anything that would prevent me from looking in the mirror and being proud of myself. And when it seemed hopeless, um, and of course, in the middle of this, I go through a divorce. I wake up in a one-bedroom apartment. It was just perfect in terms of the universe just saying, "Really, you're all that?" And it finally broke in 2011. Um, the economy changed. All of a sudden, things picked up again, and I was back in business. And but I was never to be the same. That what I had done wasn't fun anymore, um, and I decided to sort of try something else. And so, beginning in 2015, I started selling projects and selling businesses and taking money off the table, um, and and turning towards spirituality. Interestingly, and it's like the universe was somehow directing me to really sort of revisit what little Bobby was so interested in. And I had just come through this period where I had survived. I knew uh, I knew that I was capable of bending and not breaking under the kind of stresses that I never imagined I was capable of. And and I started just reading things like um, Zen, and I started reading things like Alan Watts, and I started seeing connections between what these great people had said. And I started being interested in something called near death experiences. Interestingly, I just started reading about people who had sort of flatlined and had come back, having had this realization, this revelation, and their lives were never to be the same. And I couldn't help but thinking, man, I would give anything to have that sense of knowing, that sense of having seen the other side of the veil. But I don't want to die. I don't want to flatline. And so I ended up starting, somebody recommended that I read the Pollen book, which I did in 2018, and started researching psychedelics. And one day I came across a study that um, indicated that those who had had a mystical experience under the influence of these psychedelics were reporting very, very similar findings as those who had had NDEs. And I thought, aha, I can actually have this experience without worrying about dying, physically dying. And so I heard about this retreat center in Jamaica. I booked myself. A month before I went, I filed for divorce from my second wife. And I made a commitment to the universe. I said, look, um, I'm going to throw all of my compasses, all of my maps, everything out of this ship, my life, and trust that you have my back, and and just sail. And that's what I did. And that was October of 2019. November of 2019, I went to Jamaica, scared, maybe more than I've ever been scared, because of course I had never done psychedelics. I had heard what they said about psychedelics in terms of losing your mind and going crazy, and um, didn't sound like a lot of fun. So, uh, but I took it seriously, and I had an intention. They said how important having an intention was. I was blessed to have done a lot of really good therapy over the years. So I'd opened up a lot of those trauma closets and had processed a lot of that grief. And I went with what I call my George Harrison, my sweet Lord intention. And I wanted to know the Lord. I wanted to meet the Lord. I wanted to see the Lord. I wanted to feel the Lord. And and on the third trip, um, my wish came true. Um, and I still get choked up and get goosebumps when I think about it. Um, it it didn't happen immediately. You know, I swallowed this huge amount of psychedelic mushrooms, um, and it was like a 6 hour um, terrorizing journey on an actual beach. It felt like it was a storm. It felt like, uh, you know, people talk about psychedelics like, oh, let's do them recreationally. Well, maybe a small amount, but you'd have to be, in my opinion, kind of out of your mind to take a lot of psychedelics and think it's going to be only fun. It was one of the hardest experiences of my life.
So maybe let's talk about this. So
Yeah,
first of all, hearing like not being any stranger toward the ebbs and flows, the high points and the low points of life, still with that kernel of resilience as a young man, learning and observing from your father, your family, um, and then coming to this work. I'd love to get just painting a bit more of a detailed picture of what is a psychedelic retreat in Jamaica. You're on the beach, maybe just to add a little bit more color.
sure,
Um,
sure.
how do you get started? Yeah.
So this particular retreat center, I feel, did a really good job at what I later found out was sort of best practices, um, starting with preparation, starting with weeks and weeks in advance, sort of speaking with each attendee, taking their temperature, where they're at, um, getting a sense of sort of what work they've done to lead to this, and and then it's a group process. Uh, I had never been in group therapy. You know, to me, group therapy was about one on one, and that was a really mind opening experience. The idea of entire strangers, other humans coming together in this, in the Caribbean, all with our own traumas and our own sort of. You have to have hit a certain low point uh, to do this, and that's what I found. Most of us had tried different therapies. We had sort of we're all seekers, seeking sort of just happiness, contentment, and and slowly you start to get to know these other also broken humans, beautiful humans, and I think the idea was to sort of make people feel comfortable to just crack open a little bit in therapy. And they have therapists and they have physicians and they have specialists there who really create this safe container, and meditation and yoga to really make people let their guard down, uh, their ego. Maybe let their ego take a little bit of a break, enough to let the medicine do its job. And I feel like I saw that unfold. I saw sort of we all arrived from the airport scared and just hardened from trauma, right? With this shell that we all build to protect ourselves. And the only way that these things can work is if we allow a little bit of that shell to crack and a little bit of the medicine to get in, and then to talk about it and to because that's really what it's about. It's not about the medicine, in my opinion. In my opinion, that the molecules are a small piece of it. It's really about the therapy and then processing what you learn. So you do the medicine, you have group therapy, you relax, you think, you journal, and take a day off. Really think about it, reflect on it, good or bad, and then you go for a second journey at a higher dose, perhaps. And I was done after 2 sessions. I wasn't going to do the third. I had come to have a mystical experience. It didn't happen. Frankly, I was watching some other people having what they would call really challenging trips. And I thought, well, I haven't had that, so maybe I'll stop while I'm ahead. I got a lot of affirmation like, Robert, you're fine. You're good. Don't worry. Don't worry. Be happy. And to their credit, the facilitators at this particular retreat said, Robert, this is your retreat. You chose to come here, but you told us that you came for a reason. You haven't achieved that reason. Why wouldn't you try everything to have that experience? And I trusted them. And so with their guidance, I increased my dose pretty substantially. And that's when I had this experience. And you want me to share the experience?
Yeah, so let's maybe get into this. This is your experience, your encounter with God, divinity, with as much detail as possible. The colors, the sounds,
Sure.
the level of intensity, body sensations.
Yeah. So in my um, experience, my awakening, my rebirth was a 1 trillionth of a 1 trillionth part of a second that it happened. It was a flash, and it was at the very end of this trip. Um, and I looked up at the sky, and there was a flash that came down right through my head into my heart. And that second, um, there's the goosebumps again. In that second, I knew things like everything that had happened to me in my life had happened for a reason. Everything, including the 2 trips I had had earlier in this week, that the moment now couldn't have happened if it hadn't happened that way. I thought about the people in my life as having been either a teacher or a student, and that was a new frame. Um, it was a grand feeling, like everything we learn from things like the Bible. Um, it's all true. Just we humans um, uh, don't understand sort of all of these clues that we get, maybe. And again, this is my experience.
Mhm.
Um, there was this really profound feeling of we never left the Garden of Eden. Here we are. Here we are. We're all brothers and sisters, and we're all connected. We're all one. We're all it, whatever you want to call it. We are, of course. It's so simple. It's not complex. And I, um, I sort of likened it. Of course, it very much, as you know, is you can't really put it into words. But there's a movie I saw once called The Sixth Sense. You ever see that movie?
Of course.
Okay. And so there's a point in that movie, and I won't give it away for people that haven't seen it, but there's a point in that movie where what you thought is shown in just bright, irrefutable ways to be totally the opposite from what you thought. And that was the feeling that I had. Like everything um, was not what I had thought. It validated little Bobby in a way that I didn't know was possible. It was, I consider it the missing piece to my life tapestry. It made so much of the suffering that I had experienced have a purpose all of a sudden. Um, I also felt this enormous weight of um, unworthiness. Like maybe God had made a mistake um, revealing Himself to me. I mean, I'm just Bobby Ansin. Come on, I'm not Ron Ansin. I'm not all these other great luminaries who I thought of as just bigger than life individuals. And I don't know that they had this experience. And not only did I have the experience, I feel like seeds were planted in me by the universe. I had this new sense of purpose. Um, it turned back on that entrepreneurial light. Um, After what I had gone through with this project and the Great Recession, I had all but sort of given up. I thought, okay, well, I guess little Bobby's not going to be able to change the world. Maybe I'm just supposed to continue to be the best dad I can be, and maybe they're the ones who are supposed to be. And all of a sudden, it was like, no, you're the one. You're supposed to.
Mm.
And I felt like there was this force that um, was encouraging me to see that I had a new something to do, and that was hard to swallow. Like, but then I realized there are no coincidences. I remembered that there are no coincidences. Everything happens for a reason. Um, I can't explain it, but I just know it to be so. And within a day, uh, the seeds of healing hearts started to germinate, and um, and the initial feeling was I just was unaware that this kind of healing was available in this world, just wholly unaware. And as somebody who had always been sort of um, wanting to help other people and wanting to help uplift other people, to think that this kind of healing was available. So I started thinking about minorities. I started thinking about disenfranchised communities. I started thinking about veterans. I started thinking about a whole bunch of different sort of groups who've been so traumatized by their experiences. And my entrepreneurial brain was like, imagine if we could bring this healing to those communities. And the next year was COVID 2020. And so all of a sudden I had this ingredient of it's horrific what's happening with COVID, but given my studying folks like Alan Watts, I knew that there was an opposite side to look at. There was the other side of the coin to consider, and that was, gee, maybe if viruses can be so incredibly efficient to spread a negative virus, imagine if we could harness that energy to spread a good virus, and that excited me. That that really excited me, and and so for the next 2 years, I went about trying to figure out how to go about this and how not to go about this. And so I committed early on not to be the same entrepreneur that I'd always been, starting businesses. And I was going to let my heart lead this thing. And I was going to let this thing develop sort of organically and not pretend that I was so smart that I could put a business plan together and say, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to do it. And we're going to turn left and turn right and go straight. Um, so I just started by interviewing everybody and anybody I could meet. Um, I was introduced to Adriana Kurtzer, and I explained what had happened to me, and we instantly hit it off. And I ended up hiring Adriana just to introduce me to some of her friends and contacts, and she did a great job. She organized what I call my listening tour in psychedelics,
Yeah.
and a lot of uncomfortable conversations that was so helpful. Just speaking with people who had such a difference of opinion in terms of politics or economics or uh, learning about this psychedelic field that was certainly not the loving place I expected after I had my moment in Jamaica. You know, um, and I was off to the races. And so it's only really been a year since we formally launched the foundation, and I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and excited to take what I think is a powerful model to additional communities.
Yeah, I want to hear more about this work with Healing Hearts. Something that I'm struck by in your story, and this is maybe the second time that I've heard it in this way, and sharing it with others, is the the immediate and flashing moment of insight. Like you said, that it happened just as quick as a wink, and that even though the seeds took time to bear fruit, that just kind of this moment of positive alignment, of self love and um, confirmation about your life's path, the meaning of your own suffering and struggle, uh, having purpose, as you said, but also um, that it didn't tarnish you in any way. It wasn't that it made you worse for wear, but going back to that idea of resilience, but that it had, even at your lowest points, or even in the search for love and affirmation from the father figures in your life, that it still it still made you exactly who you were, and that it made you ready for this moment.
Yeah,
It's kind of mind blowing, honestly, that anything could provide this moment of insight. Um, so let's talk about your work with Healing Hearts.
sure.
So you are now the lead of this foundation that you created, and you have, since you started, have been funding initiatives specifically with psychedelic organizations that are and leading in research and leading in therapeutics and applications, specifically focused on marginal communities. And your work has been focused on the LGBTQIA plus community. And I'd love to hear more about what was your inspiration for focusing your energy and resources on the training, the attention, um, in providing care to this particular community at this time.
Sure. So honestly, I didn't really care who we worked with. I just wanted to work with people who I felt could benefit from the kind of healing that I experienced. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it was intuitive to me to try to target not just traumatized humans, but could we identify traumatized humans who maybe were put here on this planet to be angels, to help others, to be change agents, and but maybe haven't been able to be that angel because of their own traumas. And so, what might that look like if we could help direct the kind of healing that I experience towards potential change agents, and then to sort of help guide them back to their own community where they could be the angel that they were meant to be? That excited me. That was the business sense. That's scalable to me. Um, the reason why the LGBT community was sort of where we landed to start was because in the 1970s, my dad was outed as a gay man. And that was the meteor that hit the Ansin family, um, starting in 1972 when I was 3. Too early for me to know what was going on, but not too early for me to experience the ramifications of that in my family. And anybody who's experienced trauma knows some of what that feels like. Um, it took the form of bullying in my family, being the youngest. You know, they say that sometimes dysfunctional families can turn within and sort of cannibalize, and and I don't blame them because when you're trying to survive, um, but it had a profound impact on me as the youngest, um, and you know, my dad, who had always been bigger than life, um, watching him embrace his new community and embrace his new identity and show me that growing up in a very blue collar, it's not cool to be queer community. Um, it was funny. It was like, thanks, Dad. It wasn't hard enough to be Jewish in a blue collar community. And now I have, Dad who's head of industry is also, not straight. Thanks, Dad. But but now I mean it, thanks, Dad, because he really taught me what real leadership entails. Um, and I saw him save lives during the AIDS epidemic, and that had a huge impact on me. Um, and more recently, um, my oldest child, Indigo, came out to me in high school and has transitioned from uh, from what we had known to being indigo. And so through Indigo's eyes, I've learned that there's still a lot more work to be done. My dad was part of the civil rights movement in terms of acceptance and loving people for whomever they are and whomever they choose to be. Um, and Indigo has helped me as a father to understand that we have further to go in terms of just accepting people, meeting them where they're at, accepting them for who they are, and not hating on them, and not allowing our shadows um, to cause harm to others. And so, fine, work with that community. And so, first thing we did, Zach, was we identified the leaders in the psychedelic LGBT world, specifically those. Well, we had a series of conversations, and we said, "What do you need?" Simple as that. You're the experts. You're on the front lines. We're not the experts. I don't want to become the expert. Um, and there was a sort of pretty unanimous um, opinion that what was needed more than anything was queer facilitators within a psychedelics. Sort of like, if you want people who need this healing to even consider something like psychedelics, then you really ought to have somebody who comes from that community, who understands that trauma, to be the one that reaches out their hand and welcomes them in. It seems so simple, but yet that's not sort of what was happening. And so we need more trained, ethical facilitators from the queer community. And so we said, great, let's make monies available. Let's develop an RFP, because I'm a business guy, and let's have some competition. And uh, let's try to direct some dollars towards the best programs. And it's the Wild West. So there's not one standard program that's considered gold standard. And so we said, let's take $500,000 and let's open this thing up and let's welcome everybody and anybody who has a great program. And our timing was great. This was last summer. And we got about 50 applications in for funding. And we put a group together and to review these one by one, sort of painstakingly. And we selected 7 of the organizations that we felt did the best job of meeting the thresholds that we set in the RFP. Um, and some of those thresholds were non-political. Not everybody turned out to be so non-political, but non-political, and wanting to ally with us. And so we've now gone ahead and developed partnerships with these 7 organizations, and it's remarkable. Some organizations that most people have heard of that are just well-known brands, but we intentionally selected some smaller nonprofits that are just doing incredible work somehow on sort of shoestring budgets. And as you know, we just convened all of these grantees together out in California for an event we call Caring for the Caregivers to continue to push this idea of collaboration, community, and connection. And thrilled that we chose this community. And looking at some other communities we hope to work with next.
Yeah. So maybe just from this year of grant making and learning with these organizations focused on a particular community with particular needs, maybe zooming out and thinking about our own community, the emerging Jewish psychedelic community with our own traumas, our own spiritual needs, certainly the need for culturally, spiritually informed care. Um, what might we learn from your work with Healing Hearts work with the LGBTQ community and its leaders and finding guides that we might start to think about, develop, and work with as we are moving into providing this kind of access for psychedelic care in the Jewish community?
Sure. Zach, may I start by just sharing a little bit of how I found my own Jewishness awaken in the last?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Please.
So, as I shared earlier, I never really felt Jewish. It wasn't a big part of my upbringing. About a month before my bar mitzvah, I literally went to my parents and I said, guys, I'll do this. If you really want me to do this, I'm pretty much ready. I know all the prayers, but I'm really only doing it because my older brother Barry got a bunch of presents and savings, accounts, and it just doesn't seem right. And so they said, listen, if you don't feel like you want to do it, then don't. So I didn't. Um, we lost my dad last
Okay.
year after a few years of
I'm so
Parkinson's.
sorry.
Thank you.
Really sorry.
And when he was in end stage Parkinson's and really sort of was in mostly a vegetative state, this bigger than man life, this bigger than life man, um, it really brought up questions about my own spirituality, my newfound spirituality. And I wanted to understand from his chosen religion, Judaism, sort of what did Jews say about this? And what did Jews think in terms of the soul and the body? And so I started studying about sort of Judaism. And I was thrilled to learn how consistent what Judaism says was with my own understanding of sort of who we are and what we are. And it brought me so much closer with my dad. What was hard was I understood where dad was going when he passed. I understood where dad was before he was in this state. But where are you now, dad? Where's my dad? And and Judaism helped me to understand the difference between this body, these skin bags, and our soul, and how when our body gets ill, we aren't able to, our souls aren't able to control our bodies anymore. So that really was helpful, and and ever since Dad passed, just about a year ago, I felt him stronger than ever again. And so that's been amazing. The other way that my Jewishness, my roots have been awakened, I recently did an ancestry DNA test and confirmed I'm 99.999% Ashkenazi Ukrainian Jew. And
Welcome to
watching
the
what's happening.
club, brother.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Um, and so, because of this spiritual work, I've really felt called to do my own ancestry, to learn about my relatives who were in the Ukraine, and learn a little bit about what their lives were like. And and so it's been hard to watch what's happening over there now. I was scheduled to visit literally the synagogue that's been rebuilt since my family was there praying, um, and I couldn't because of COVID actually. And but I do remember, Zach, you know, every every Passover, every high holiday, um, about Israel and about we can never, ever, ever allow what happened to happen again. Never again, never again. And frankly, I always thought, of course, it'll never happen again. Of course, it'll never happen again. I don't see much anti Semitism. And the last year has been really difficult for me, really difficult. I really try to be not political. I really try to be sort of, I don't do social media, but it's taken a personal toll. Um, to me, the kinds of anti-Semitism that we've seen, um, and it's really sort of re-energized me because these are my people. I do feel like um, uh, I am part of this tribe. We are brothers and sisters, um, and so I'm sort of ready to do what I can to be part of the healing that I feel like our community needs. So specifically in terms of what's the application, in terms of perhaps for our Jewish community, um, I'm 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 a firm believer in finding the best and the brightest who are doing really good work, who know what needs to be done, and empowering them, and not recreating the wheel. And I'm a big believer in competition, and and so uh, I feel like what we've created in terms of healing hearts, the model of healing hearts, whereby we say, you leaders on the front lines are partnered with us at all times, telling us what the needs are. And they're changing, as you know, in psychedelics because the market's changing so quickly. And how do we put together um, programs that help empower the best and the brightest who are doing the best work? Simple as that. And by the best work, I mean the most ethical work, the legal work, um, the all of sort of the best practices in terms of um, you know morals and values, and not everybody is acting in, I would say, a way that is ethical, and and learning together, and trusting together. One of my million takeaways from Jamaica was how important it is, we humans, to really start paying more attention to our natural environment. um, I take time at least every hour to think about trees, and I my mantra is like, think like a tree. Trees have been around so much longer than we have, and therefore they've evolved much longer than we have. And I think we've been taught that we're so smart because we can move around and we have these brains. But to me, um, just because trees can't move and their timeline is quite different than ours, um, I've learned to sort of calm my monkey brain and to be more patient and to just stop when I'm feeling that ego saying, go do it, and just say, what would a tree do? And it's like, no, trees are fine. Trees are perfectly fine. And you know what trees do that's so important is they collaborate, they connect, they create community for the benefit of the community. And I feel like we need to do more of that as humans. Um, I've been disappointed that I haven't seen more of that in psychedelics. Just collaboration, community, connection. Um, it's one of the reasons why I love our friendship, Zach. Um, First second that I met you, I just knew this is a guy who understands that. Um, and he knows that 1 + 1 can equal 3. And so that's what I'm pushing. And less ego and more heart.
Hmm. Wow. Well, certainly, maybe wrapping up our conversation, both as Ukrainian Jews with a powerful moment of awakening in our lives, thinking about ending with the wisdom of trees. I know a spiritual teacher for both of us, Ram Dass, um, and the beautiful idea that he often shared about how we look upon others and sometimes the judgment that we feel and how we can heal those judgmental eyes. That idea that would you ever judge a tree for being different from another one?
Amen.
And
That's
so
right.
again, like not only thinking about myself as a tree, but another that um, we have work to do to heal our own biases, healing the things that came before us for the sake of our ancestors and our descendants, looking for those communities, those leaders who need the most assistance, really need a chance and a leg up, and honoring where we have come from as being the most important stepping stones to the place that we're at right now in our future. And I can't think of a better incarnation of all of these ideas and lessons than you and your life and your work. And so thank you, Robert, for speaking
Thank
with
you.
me,
I
being
love you,
part of
and
our
I'm
community, and thank you.
thank you.